September 1st, 1969, Idris I, king of Libya, is in Turkey for medical treatment. Overnight, a small group inside the army, the Free Officers Movement, just 70 men, takes over Libya in a military coup. In Benghazi, the leader of the movement, a man just 27 years old, announces on the radio that the country is now under his control. His name is Muammar Gaddafi. At first, Libyans welcome Gaddafi as a savior. The people see the king as corrupt. They accuse him of selling Libya's resources to Western corporations while they live in poverty. Gaddafi moves quickly. He nationalizes foreign oil companies. He redirects oil profits into free education, free housing, and universal healthcare. Within a decade, Libya is unrecognizable. Oil revenues are so high that by the late 1970s, Libya, an African country, ranks among the world's richest countries by GDP per capita, surpassing Germany, Australia, and even the United States. Power, though, then corrupts the savior. Gaddafi begins to dream of exporting his revolution beyond Libya. He wants to create a third power, a political force capable of challenging American, European, and Israeli dominance in the Middle East and the world at large. First, he tries to unite the Arab world. When that fails, he turns to Africa. Gradually, Libya's oil wealth is diverted away from national development toward militant groups across the globe, paid to destabilize the established order. From the IRA in Britain, to the Black Panthers in the United States, to militias in Africa, South America, and Southeast Asia. For decades, Libya appears on the front page of international headlines. Gaddafi, in extravagant robes and dark sunglasses, surrounded by female bodyguards, traveling in bulletproof tents, meeting world leaders on his own theatrical terms. No longer praised for improving the lives of his people, now known only for terrorism, assassination plots, airline bombings, and support for violent regimes. International condemnation follows, then sanctions, then isolation. The Libyan economy begins to collapse. In 2003, after Saddam Hussein is captured and hanged, Gaddafi takes notice. He quits Libya's nuclear weapons program and tries to rebuild relations with the US and Europe. For a moment, it works, until 2011. In Tunisia, a street vendor, harassed by local officials, sets on fire. Protests explode. In Tunisia, then Egypt, then Libya, then across the Arab world, a chain reaction against decades of authoritarian rule. In Libya, it becomes war. Gaddafi is overthrown, hunted down, and killed by his own citizens. This is the story of Muammar Gaddafi, of a revolution that lifted a poor country into wealth, and of the later revolution that tore him apart. When Muammar Gaddafi rises to power, Libya has barely 2 million people. Almost all of them live along the Mediterranean coast. It is an enormous country, as large as Italy, Germany, France, and Spain combined, or slightly smaller than the American Midwest, and 95% of its desert. Only a few decades earlier, Libya had been under Italian colonial rule. During World War II, it was occupied by British and French forces. Even after independence in 1951, much of Libya's most valuable resource, oil, remains in foreign hands. American and European companies extract it. Profits flow abroad, while many Libyans suffer from poverty and preventable diseases. Colonialism and imperialism have left deep structural scars on the country. Gaddafi now wants to erase them, so he immediately orders all the Italian present in Libya, since colonial times, 20,000 people in total, out of the country, all their lands and assets seized. Then he nationalizes oil fields operated by British Petroleum in 1970 and American Conoco in 1973, expanding state control across the industry. By 1974, oil revenues jumped from $2 to $10 billion. An extra $8 billion per year may not seem extraordinary, but shared among just 2 million people, it is a fortune. Especially because among all Arab nations at the time, Libya ranks second only to Saudi Arabia in daily oil production, about 3.4 million barrels per day compared to Saudi Arabia's 3.8 million. Growing up listening to the speeches of Egypt's president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who argues that Arab nations must control their own resources and use them to lift their populations out of poverty, Gaddafi knows he must act quickly. He understands that, to keep his revolution alive, people must see results. So he redirects oil revenue into free education, healthcare, and housing. In 1969, fewer than 1 in 4 Libyan adults can read and write. Under his rule, literacy rises from 25% to 80%. Education is fully funded by the state. No tuition, no textbooks, no fees. Scholarships are introduced for students to study abroad. Children from poor families can now become doctors and engineers without falling into debt. Hospitals increase by 50%. The number of doctors rises from around 700 to 3,000. Infant mortality drops from 120 deaths per 1,000 births to below 20. Malaria is eradicated. Trachoma and tuberculosis sharply reduced. Patients whose conditions cannot be treated domestically are sent abroad at state expense. Life expectancy rises from 55 years in 1969 to 65 by 1980 in just 10 years. Housing is also constructed in large quantities by the state, rented at symbolic prices, and sold through near-zero interest loans, eliminating slums and reducing homelessness. Roads are paved nationwide, while fuel, electricity, and staple foods are made cheaper through heavy subsidies. Water, however, remains the country's greatest strategic challenge. While searching for oil in the Sahara, geologists discover something unexpected: the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, one of the largest fossil aquifers in the world. It contains an estimated 150,000 cubic kilometers of groundwater, a volume of water double that of the entire Caspian Sea. To exploit it, Gaddafi launches the Great Man-Made River Project, 2,800 kilometers of pipeline and 1,300 deep wells, drilled over 500 meters, channeling groundwater from the desert to coastal cities and agricultural zones. It is a success. Socially, Muammar Gaddafi also introduces reforms that are unusual in much of North Africa at the time. He makes female education compulsory, expands women's access to employment, restricts polygamy, raises the legal marriage age to 16, strengthens protections in divorce, allows women to inherit, and prohibits female genital mutilation. For ordinary Libyans, life becomes cheap, stable, and predictable. Living standards rise. Much of the population now supports the revolution. Muammar Gaddafi has clearly become their hero, and Libya, a redistribution-based socialist utopia. But is there a price? From the very beginning, power is fully in his hands. In the Green Book, he calls liberal democracy a lie, political parties as sources of division, and rejects both Western capitalism and Soviet communism, presenting his vision, a third way, as the valid alternative. A one-man system without independent institutions. An economy where the government is the main employer, private business restricted, and large companies state-owned. When students, professionals, and urban elites begin demanding freedom and free elections, he responds by proclaiming the Jamahiriya in 1977, the People's Republic. He dissolves parliament and replaces it with people's committees and people's congresses, presenting these bodies to his people as tools of direct democracy. He makes citizens feel they got what they wanted. At the same time, he pretends he is no longer the ruler, just the leader of the revolution, claiming that power is fully in their hands. In reality, congresses and committees closely monitor daily life. Those who dare to criticize are tortured, imprisoned, and sometimes publicly executed. No major decision is made without his approval. One case becomes especially famous. It is the execution of Al-Sadiq Hamid al-Shuwaidi, a Libyan engineering student studying and working abroad in the United States. When al-Shuwaidi returns to Libya, he criticizes the government with his colleagues at his job. Security forces take him from his home and bring him to a university basketball court in front of thousands of students. There, he is forced to read a confession. He says he is an American spy. He says he planned to assassinate Gaddafi.
اسمي الصادق حامد الشويدي. انضميت كنت ندرس في أمريكا. انضميت لكلاب الضالة في أمريكا في سنة 81.
A special court accuses him of terrorism and sentences him to death by hanging. The execution is carried out in public.
قصد البدء في الأعمال الإرهابية السابق الإشارة إليها
التي أقرها المؤتمر بالإعدام شقا حتى الموت.
During the hanging, a female loyalist runs forward and pulls on his legs to speed up his death. State media later presents her as a national hero. Everything is broadcast on national television. Everyone sees it. Everyone remembers it. After this, almost nobody dares to protest anymore. Now that Gaddafi is in full control of Libya, he is ready to spread his revolution out of his borders. How will the world react? Coming to power during the height of the Arab-Israeli conflict, first the 1967 Six-Day War, then the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Gaddafi witnesses a series of humiliating defeats in which multiple Arab states fail to overcome a much smaller enemy, Israel. After 1967, Israel occupies the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Palestinian territory shrinks, and Arab military credibility reaches its lowest point. The death of Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1970 further fragments Arab nationalism. Without Egypt as its anchor, the idea of a united Arab nation collapses. Oil-rich states pursue their own national interests. Monarchies and republics distrust each other, and Cold War alignments deepen divisions. Israel, in the meantime, receives growing American and Western European support. For Gaddafi, this is devastation. Egypt's new president, Anwar Sadat, later signs a peace treaty with Israel to regain the Sinai Peninsula in exchange for recognizing the Israeli state. Egypt, the military and demographic giant of the Arab world, leaves the conflict. Without Egypt, any Arab military effort to retake Palestinian territories becomes unlikely. In this vacuum, Gaddafi attempts to position himself as Nasser's successor. With oil prices surpassing $35 per barrel by 1980 and revenues reaching around $20 billion annually, he rapidly expands Libya's armed forces. Gaddafi then tries to unify the Arab world under his leadership. In 1971, he attempts a political union with Egypt and Syria. In 1974, he tries again with Tunisia. Both fail. Leaders distrust Gaddafi's unpredictability. In 1977, instead of uniting with Egypt, Libya fights a brief border war against it. Rather than uniting the Arab world, Gaddafi isolates Libya from it. In the 1970s, Libya is discovered cooperating with Pakistan in the development of nuclear weapons. Seeking uranium for their development, Gaddafi turns to northern Chad's uranium-rich Aouzou Strip. At first, Libya supports Chadian rebels, then launches a military intervention, a 9-year conflict. The war culminates in 1987 in the Toyota War, in which highly mobile Chadian forces, backed by France, defeat the Libyan armies in the deserts, forcing Libya to withdraw after massive losses. Frustrated by his repeated failures in the region, yet determined to confront Western influence anyway, Gaddafi begins funding militant and insurgent movements worldwide. The IRA in the United Kingdom, ETA in Spain, the Red Brigades in Italy, the Black Panthers in the United States, the Tupamaros in South America, the Umkhonto we Sizwe in South Africa, along many others. In Indonesia alone, for example, Gaddafi ends up financing at least 4 separatist movements: the Free Aceh Movement, the Free Papua Movement, the Republic of South Maluku, and Fretilin in Timor-Leste. Libyan support stretches so far that it reaches the FLNKS independence movement in French Caledonia, thousands of kilometers away from Libya. Simultaneously, Libya supports regimes such as Idi Amin's Uganda and Charles Taylor in Liberia. When Uganda invades Tanzania in 1978, Libya deploys troops to assist Amin, suffering heavy losses during Tanzania's counteroffensive that removes Amin from power in 1979. In 1979, the United States adds Libya to its list of state sponsors of terrorism. From this moment, tensions escalate further. In April 1984, during an anti-Gaddafi demonstration outside the Libyan embassy in London, British police officer Yvonne Fletcher is killed by gunfire originating from inside the Libyan embassy. In April 1986, a bomb planted by Libyan intelligence explodes at the Labelle nightclub in West Berlin, a venue popular with U.S. soldiers. 3 people are killed and more than 200 are injured. 10 days later, U.S. President Ronald Reagan orders airstrikes on Tripoli and Benghazi. One of Gaddafi's adopted children reportedly dies during the raid. In December 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 explodes over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing 270 people. Investigations later identify Libyan intelligence agents behind it. In 1989, UTA Flight 772 implodes over Niger, killing 170 people. Investigations trace responsibility again to Libyan agents. By the year 2000, Libya is an isolated country. After the Lockerbie bombing, the UN has imposed massive sanctions on Libya, banning international flights and cutting the country off from much of the world. Years of sanctions, military spending, and enormous support for armed groups worldwide have irreversibly damaged the economy, leaving the population increasingly angry and frustrated with Gaddafi. In 2003, the Iraqi president Saddam Hussein is overthrown, captured by US forces, and hanged. Soon after, Muammar Gaddafi meets with Arab leaders. He argues that if they do not unite now, any of them could be next. But once again, his call for unity receives no response. Realizing that he himself could actually be next, Gaddafi changes course. In late 2003, he announces that Libya will abandon all programs related to nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction. International inspectors are invited in. Centrifuges, missile parts, and nuclear research are handed over to the United States and the United Kingdom. Gaddafi understands that his confrontation has failed. Sanctions have destroyed Libya's economy. His army is outdated and his allies are gone. After Iraq, he now understands what Western military intervention is really capable of. So he begins repairing Libya's international image. Gaddafi officially accepts responsibility for the Lockerbie bombing. In 2003, Libya agrees to pay $2.7 billion in compensation to the families of the 270 victims, about $10 million per family. Similar compensation is paid to victims of other attacks. Gaddafi never personally admits guilt, but he opens to reconciliation. Libya also begins cooperating with Western agencies, especially after the September 11, 2001 attacks. It shares information on extremist networks. It ends support for terrorist groups, presenting itself as a partner in counterterrorism. By 2004, Western leaders begin visiting Tripoli again. Foreign companies return, embassies reopen, and sanctions are lifted. Libya is removed from the US list of state sponsors of terrorism in 2006. After decades of isolation, Libya is finally back. At the same time, Gaddafi accepts another reality. He has failed to unite the Arab world, so he turns to Africa. Since the late 1990s, he has been promoting the idea of a United States of Africa, a single African superstate with a shared military, currency, and foreign policy. In 1999, Libya hosts the summit that helps create the African Union. Gaddafi publicly apologizes to African leaders for Arab involvement in the historical slave trade. He calls on Africans to see Libya not as an Arab state, but as an African state, even asking for Libya to be considered a black country. He begins pouring billions of dollars into African infrastructure and development projects, backing presidents and governments. In return, many African leaders support him internationally, especially at the United Nations. While internationally Libya is recovering, domestically the situation is very different. Oil revenue, instead of being invested in improving Libyan lives, keeps being diverted abroad. In the past, toward militant causes, now toward expensive African mega-projects that mainly serve to strengthen Gaddafi's personal image. At home, unemployment rises to over 30%. GDP per capita falls to around $4,000, returning to 1970s levels, wealth becoming increasingly concentrated in the hands of a small elite. At the same time, a deeply traumatic case resurfaces and spreads across the country. In 1996, at Abu Salim prison, where political prisoners were held, inmates protested against poor conditions. Security forces responded by opening fire inside the prison for several hours, killing around 1,300 prisoners. For years, the regime denied the massacre. Families received no information. Many did not even know whether their relatives were alive or dead. In the early 2000s, as Libya seeks international rehabilitation, the government quietly acknowledges the killings and offers financial compensation to the families. This partial admission reopens old wounds. Families begin protesting, demanding truth and justice. By 2010, beneath the surface of apparent stability, resentment is reaching a breaking point. In 2011, in the city of Sidi Bouzid, Tunisia, a street vendor, Mohamed Bouazizi, sets himself on fire after years of harassment by local authorities. His act spreads rapidly on social media, triggering mass protests that overthrow Tunisia's dictatorship. The unrest soon spreads across the Arab world, to Egypt, Yemen, Syria, and beyond. In Libya, it becomes a civil war. The country splits into two main camps: forces loyal to Muammar Gaddafi, based in Tripoli, West Libya, and rebel forces centered in Benghazi, East Libya. As protests grow, Gaddafi orders his troops to fire on demonstrators. He publicly threatens to hunt down his opponents, house by house, and to purify Libya, alarming the international community and the United Nations.
وسنزحف أنا والملايين لتطهير ليبيا شبر شبر، بيت بيت، دار دار، زنقة زنقة، فرد فرد، حتى تطهر البلد من الدلس والإرجاس. لا يمكن نسمح لليبيا تضيع بين ايدينا بدون مبرر.
In March 2011, the United Nations Security Council passes a resolution allowing military action to protect civilians. Under this mandate, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, intervenes. NATO enforces a no-fly zone and launches airstrikes against air defenses, tanks, military bases, and supply routes. Officially, the mission is to protect civilians. In practice, it removes Gaddafi's military advantage. Without air support and heavy weapons, loyalist forces weaken quickly. With NATO air cover, rebel units advance westward. By mid-2011, rebels enter Tripoli. Gaddafi flees to Sirte, his final stronghold. On October 20, 2011, while trying to escape Sirte in a convoy, Gaddafi's vehicles are hit by NATO aircraft. He escapes on foot with a small group of guards and hides at a construction site inside a drainage pipe. Rebel fighters discover him, shoot his remaining guards, and order him to come out. Videos recorded at the scene show him alive at the moment of capture, in a pool of blood, disoriented, surrounded by rebels. He is beaten and bruised during the chaotic arrest, possibly also attacked with a piece of iron or a bayonet in the air. At some point during the chaos, Gaddafi is shot at close range. He is placed on a pickup truck, where he appears to fall on the road or be pulled down amid the crowd at some point. He is then transferred into an ambulance and taken toward Misrata. The ambulance is caught in crossfire and riddled with bullets. By the time it reaches the hospital, he is dead. For several days, his body is kept in a meat refrigerator inside a shopping center in Misrata and displayed to the public. Tens of thousands of people line up to see it. After 42 years in power, Gaddafi's rule ends. In its wake, Libya is left in ruins. Around 90,000 people are wounded, missing, or killed. In 2014, a new conflict erupts between rival governments. Fighting continues until 2020, claiming another 16,000 lives. By 2022, although institutions remain weak and divisions persist, Libya finally enters a fragile period of relative stability. A new era begins.